Okay, if you're going to rebuild this side of the saw, it's worth just checking out the oil pump. Now the oil pumps on the 350s are different from the one that I've shown in the 346. Probably the pump's not different. You undo that screw and pull this out. This is different in so much as all you've got is a little hole there, and you can see that indentation where it pushes against the square in there. So there's no immediate oil pipe, as in with the other saws. You know, you don't take this out and you pull the oil pipe out. So if you get a leak from of chain oil when it's sat overnight, have a look at the 346 and it will tell you how to fix that oil leak, because this pump looks identical with a hole there and a hole there, although some of the 346 pumps have got a little boss around that then fits into a recess in this rubber. So we'll just put this back on. There's a little key there, and the key sits in that notch there. I don't know much about this saw as far as oil leaks is concerned, so it looks alright. The adjuster screw went down in that hole first before you push this in like that, and then put the screw in. So that's the screw in place, pump finished. Now so if there's no oil pipe, it means that there's no wobble head, i.e. a filter on the end of a rubber pipe in the tank, which is entirely correct. So where's the filter? So just turn the saw over and try and keep everything in shot. You might not see, just down there's a dark covered cover, and you can get to it from here just. But luckily we have the other saw body, and that's where the filter comes out, and that's the little plastic cover, and there's the filter. I think we'll just zoom in on that. So that's the filter there, and I've just blown it out with an airline, and then it fits into that hole like that, and the screw holds it in place. So there's no wobble head. So as far as I'm concerned, if you wanted to use a saw for chainsaw carving, this is a bit big unless you're using it for roughing out, and this saw, because it hasn't got a wobble head, is not that suitable for using a saw in strange positions for a considerable amount of time, because you'll probably end up with oiling problems. And there it is in place with the screw holding it in. Right, so next thing, the cover. I'll just take the screw out. Sometimes it's handy if there's a specific screw for a job, you can put it back in where it came from. So now we've got to put the chain adjuster in, and there's a little parallel end there, and that is sort of lozenge shaped, oval shaped. So that goes in first, and then the oval shape pushes into there. And there we go. Then the cover goes on, like that, and the screw goes back in there. If you've got a screw for a specific job, and when you've taken it out and removed whatever it's holding, if it's alright, or if it won't be a pain to put it back from whence it came, then it's always very useful. And if you'll notice, if you go back about 30 seconds, you'll notice this screw was in that case. So it just, well, it's a specific screw, put it there, then you know where it is. So that goes back in there like that. Then we've got the oil pump worm. Here's the worm drive. It's effectively just the thread that runs in there, in the oil pump. And you've got these dogs on this end. So that fits on there. There we go. And the end of the clutch drum has got dogs that engage with that. So yet again, it's only when the clutch is engaged that the oil pump drives. So here we've got the next few bits. I'm just going to turn this engine over to see whether there's an oil hole here, or grease hole. And there doesn't appear to be. In a lot of Huskies there's a hole just there, and it's connected with that hole there. So you can grease the bearing without taking the clutch off. But this does not seem to be the case. No. Right. That's a bit of a pain, because as we know, removing the clutch on a Husky is not quite so easy as on a still. So we put some grease on the bearing, and that goes on there. I've ranted on enough about clutch bearings. So that those dogs there engage with those there, and that's the drive. Let's just put that back together again. Bearing on, put it in, that's engaged. And then the clutch itself. Where's a pointer? See, there's a notch there, it says off. It's very easy to put this the wrong way round. So make sure you have it that way round. If you get judder and all sorts of things with your clutch, this centre section does wear in these bob weights, and these springs do eventually get soft. So I did have a, can't remember what it was now, I think it was a 357, and that was really quite worn. Yeah, and so you couldn't get creep free chain until I'd sorted that lot out. So we pop that on there. It's been a bit awkward, but it threads on anti-clockwise, because as you remember, there we go, undoing it down at the front. So that's the clutch put together, and the project's moving on. So on with the exhaust. The heat shield goes like that. Then on top of that goes the gasket, and then the exhaust goes in there, that way around. Now this idea is a bit rubbish, and it always has been. So always put some copper slip on these threads here, because you don't want to start shearing them off. And on some models there is an extra bracket that goes across those two screws and down here, which just helps things, stops things vibrating quite so much. So if you've got a few saws kicking about and it's got one of those on, add it on, it'll just help. The still method of the notches and the bolts with the square head is a lot better. The bolts are a bit heavier duty, and you don't get problems with threads, in small threads in aluminium castings that heat up a lot. So that's the exhaust in place, and when you've run this up for a while, just check the tightness of those, because they do work loose. You know, and when things have heated up and settled down, tighten them again. But you know, again, no white knuckle stuff, because otherwise you either strip the threads in the cylinder or break the bolts. But they've got to be tight. You don't want as soon as the exhaust starts rattling at all, or you hear a slight rattle, check these. Now the next thing to do, of course, will be the chain brake lever to go on. And here it is, and it just literally sits on there like that. But let's just pop round this way. Just here there's a notch, and that's for the location spring, the centering spring, which is just here. Now sometimes these will pop on. You can just push it and it will fit. Other times you're better off hooking that out first. And then you pop that on there and it sits there quite nicely then. So these screws have got a boss on the end. And it's quite a nice idea really. One that end, one the other end. So that's both ends fitted. Then this fits in there and you just compress the spring with something. And press it in place. Then you've got the centering. There we go. Then the top handle goes on, and remember, on the screws, short ones at the bottom, long ones at the side, and it just pops on and then does up. And this here, that's part of the AV mounts, and it fits to that there. So we're nearly there. Filter. There's all sorts of different types of filters for these, but that one just goes on there and clicks, locks in place. Top cover. On the ones with the primer, it's got a hole in there, whereas the standard one doesn't have that. Chain brake engages there. So very important to make sure that the chain brake is in the off position before you try and take the side cover off. Students have done it in the past, it's a right pain. The more modern ones are not quite so bad, but these ones are really quite difficult to get the dogs back in the right place with the band open. So we're nearly there. There's just a few bits to put back together, and then it's a matter of testing it and adjusting the carburettor, etc, etc.